Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to the Economic Growth Committee this morning for the 19th of June. And welcome everybody, and we'll get started. So first off, we'll ask Councillor Zebellin to open the meeting today. Oh, no. Why is it not working?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Me ino e tātou. Tū taua mai I runga, tū taua mai I raro, tū taua mai I roto, tū taua mai I waho. Kia tau ai te mauri tū, te mauri ora, ki te katoa. Haumie, hui e, tae ki e. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zebellin. I'd just like to welcome everybody today to this meeting, and just to tell everybody that the meeting has been recorded and that it's been live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. The health and safety requirements are on the screen, and that if there is an emergency or an incident, then we'll follow the governance team out of the chamber, and that all online participants are to keep their cameras tuned on and have their microphones muted. And we have got Councillor Johnson online today, so welcome, Councillor Johnson. Nice to see you. And councillors in person to be, just to make sure that, in person, yeah. And just to make sure if you've got any amendments, Councillor, just to text your amendments through to the committee administrator. And also we've got a officer presenting online, so she just has to make sure that she identifies herself when she presents online as well. So we'll now go through to apologies. We've got Councillor Johnson for early departure, and we've also got the Deputy Mayor for popping out for a period, and any other apologies. No? We'll look to vote. Sorry? I'll move that, and seconded by Councillor Wood. Thank you. If we could look to vote. That's passed, 13 votes for and none against. The second item is a notification of additional items. I haven't heard of any additional items today. So we'll carry on to the next item, which is declarations of interest. Again, I haven't heard of any declarations of interest. So we'll move on to the next item, which is public comment. We've got two public comments today. First one is from Chris T.O. who's going to speak to us on bus stops. So we've got 3 minutes, Chris. I know you've been a bit cold, so I hope you're a bit warmer.
Just about thawed out.
Your 3 minutes will start now. Thank you,
Thank
Chris.
you. Well, I hope everybody had a tailwind on the way here, as cold as it is, but that it ceases by the time you have to go home. Okay, well, thanks very much. Yesterday I spoke to Horizons and generally about the improved bus service in Palmerston North, but I did make mention of one point that I think also needs to be made to yourselves, and that is about the bus shelters at the bus stops. Now, it's great to see them being there. Bus shelters are an important part of making the public transport experience more comfortable and more pleasant and more attractive for people. However, and this is partly from my Living Streets perspective, which is a national pedestrian advocacy organisation, the location or the positioning of the shelters, many of the shelters, the new shelters that I've seen, is really, really unfortunate. I'm just putting myself in the position of a young woman walking home at night and thinking, I can't see past that thing in the footpath. I wonder what's on the other side. I wonder what's behind it. And even though there are, the sides are transparent, there's enough solid structure there that it actually blocks one's view. And for blind people and disabled people as well, it's also an unnecessary obstacle. And it needn't be like it is, and all you need to do I'm pretty sure they're still there because one of the new routes actually terminates on Amberley Ave at the Tremaine Avenue end. If you go to number 6 and 7 Amberley Ave, you'll see there are bus stops right outside there, bus shelters outside of there. And although one of them has, I believe, still an advertisement on the side panel, which also blocks view, which is not good. But the good thing about those is that they have access to that bus stop from the back part of the bus shelter. And so the bus shelter is positioned on the verge, well, where the verge was, and it's been concreted, and it doesn't block at all the footpath. So please do whatever in your power. Maybe the contract's already been signed for 5,000 of these current ones, but surely the position of them can be changed. I mean, the actual design is not bad. Actually, it's pretty good, that you can see through most of them, that there is position for people to stand as well as to sit. All good features. It's just the positioning is really poor. So, thank you.
Thank you, Chris. We've got time for one question if anybody has a question. Councillor Dennison?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chris, just with the designs, these new ones seem like they have a back to them, I'm guessing for standing if it's raining from the other direction, that forces them to be so far off the boundary of the property. Do you see that being a problematic design feature?
I mean, that part of the footpath becomes virtually unusable, especially if you're on a wheelchair or other device. Yes, I did wonder about what that's for, and I guess what you've just identified is the reason for that. But I agree, it does force it off the property boundary. But even on the property boundary, they'd be sticking, a metre or more out into the footpath. Just really poor practice. I mean, the pedestrian network guidance, which is NZTA's guidance on how to do things for pedestrians, is that you put all that sort of stuff in what's called the furniture zone, which is the part closest to the curb, and leave the what's called the CAPT, the clear accessible pathway through. Yeah.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chair.
That's all we've got time for. Thank you very much, Chris. Sorry, Mr Mayor, we don't have time for your question. Sorry about that. We have one other public comment, and it is from Pete French. He isn't actually here, but he has sent all the material out to you. I'm just going to read his public comment. Do you want me to read it for you? Okay, you can come and sit there if you want to, and I'll read it for you. Are you happy still for me to read it for you? Or would you like to read it? Would you like to read it? I've got it here. What would you like to do? Okay. So this is Pete's comment. He believes that the PNCC's traffic engineers could more readily design a roundabout situation without a physical roundabout where all traffic approaching Bogle Street's intersections with Hayden Street and Featherston Street would need to slow down a bit and give way to any traffic coming from their right. The design would save PNCC money by eliminating a possible need for a land purchase. Right turn bays into Featherston Street and Hayden Street would become more unnecessary, and through traffic in Bogle Street would flow through further from cyclists, parked cars, footpaths and residential units. He has given copies of basic design to the PNC staff members Bryce Hoskins and Glenn Connors and Dave Murphy. Okay, and you've actually circulated this information to all councillors, circulated to all councillors last night. Your microphone's not turned on. So I've read out your public comment now.
Yes, thank you. The staff member at PNCC was very helpful. Like some other staff members, I've been dealing with the very helpful people. So they circulated that for me.
Yeah. Okay. We've got time for a question. Councillor Dennison, would you like to ask him a question? I'm having trouble with this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Peter. This design that's been circulated, is this been used, have you picked this design up from another city or another example?
Yes, no, it's from this city I picked this idea up from. The intersection with Botanical, Tremaine, Gillespie's, Admiral Place, and they have a big roundabout. The traffic flows quite well there. That's where the ideas come from, except there's no room to have a physical roundabout where I'm talking about. But I'm trying to get the same idea for the Featherston, Hayden, Vogel area. But you see, we've already got one, sort of. I mean, and we've got something similar at the Botanical Gillespie's Tremaine area, where everybody just gives way to the right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep, I'm aware of that one. Thank you for that example. Thank you, Madam Chair.
There's no further questions. Thank you very much for coming in, and we've got the officers who are going to be talking on this later in the morning. Okay?
All right, thank you. I just mention, I think it's also it's a good intersection. This idea is good for bicycles also. They can get around, they can get around, pass through the different streets a lot more easily with this design that I've presented. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, I'd like to move that the Economic Growth Committee receive public comment, seconded by Councillor Wood. So if we can now vote on this. That's passed 14 votes for and none against. If we could just move to the next item, which is the minutes, confirmation of the minutes on page 9. So I'll look to move that they're a true and accurate record, seconded by Councillor Wood. There's no matters arising, so we'll look to vote on the minutes, please. That's passed 13 votes for and 1 abstention. Thank you. We'll now move to item number 8, which is CEDA's statement of intent on page 19. Thank you, Jerry and Bobby.
Morning, everybody. Thank you for having us here. We tabled our draft statement of intent a couple of months ago, and I think, as you understand, we have a period of waiting for receipt of any written amendments, and there were none. Just a couple of minor changes, only one that's really not impactful, but worth just noting that the date on the original was 2024 to 27. We thought we would be able to submit one for a 3-year period, but we still have to submit these annually, so it's just been changed to 2024-25 on the front cover. Otherwise, as tabled at the draft stage, so happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I'm looking around the room to see if there's any questions. And we have some. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Bobby and Jerry. Just was interested in the partner organizations page. I think it was towards the end of the document. And just scanning through that list, and I guess I was trying to understand, is that the complete list of all partners? Is that kind of a highlight of some of the partnerships and kind of how that framework works in terms of identifying local, regional, national?
So it's a combination of key partners that we work closely with, but also some that we hold contracts with as well. So it's a mix of both key national partners, key regional partners, and most of the local ones are ones that we work with fairly closely. We do look at this every year, and if there are any suggestions as to who we might want to include, we're really happy to take those suggestions.
Thanks. Was particularly interested to see that some Crown Research Institutes are represented and not others, and wondered if there was a strong differentiation in the strength of the connection with some of those CRIs versus others?
Yes, absolutely. So they're more related to the Manawatu Regional Food Strategy and our primary sector work. So that's why they feature more prominently than some of the others.
Right, thanks. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. The Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Jerry and Bobby. Just on the funding side, I note that 80% is council, and that's ebbed and flowed a little bit, and I realise that other EDAs have different makeups as well. Are you looking for, because originally the EDA was set up with the opportunity to perhaps get some other funding, are you looking at that?
Yes, we are. So the remainder of the funding that's not council is regional business partnership funding. So that's where that comes from. We're always on the lookout for co-funding opportunities. In fact, yesterday at the BOMA Itapu conference, which is currently running, I've had a couple of discussions with organisations who are looking for funding that we could help them with that could be funneled through CEDA. This could be through Future Farmers funding or MPI funding, but we're always on the lookout for new opportunities to bring non-council funding to the table. I think it's worth stating it's difficult out there at the moment to attract that funding. We all are aware of what's going on with some of the pots of money that we may have accessed through central government, but we are always on the lookout for that co-funding opportunity.
So like the JV funding for Tutanganui, Program Director, is that what you're sort of looking at, chasing?
Yes, we'd love to expand that to other non-council partners as well. So in that mix, there's 6 organisations that fund that, including our colleagues behind us and the 2 councils, KiwiRail and Horizons and iwi partners. But there are some big fish inside that conversation that would also like to tap for a bit of contribution to that as well. I think as we go from what we're referring to as a pre-alliance stage of the project through to full alliance, that funding is going to be easier to come by, but we're certainly tapping up every single avenue we can. We even reached out, I had a meeting last week with Robert Pagoo, who's the head of Kanoa, trying to work out whether there was any funding in the Regional Infrastructure Fund that was for discovery as opposed to the shovel-ready side, and the answer to that was no. But we're always looking to see whether there are other funds inside that central government network that can do that discovery stuff.
What about industry?
Yes, so in industry and also developers who are looking to get inside Tutanganui, the discussions we're having with some of the bigger developers who are potentially out of country is that they can come in at a relatively early stage of the project and take over all the due diligence in that space, which I think would save council and other funders that are not from industry significant funds in terms of doing the due diligence on the project. So we're always on the hunt for partners in that space. We did reach out to an EDA in the Upper North Island that was originally funded through almost 100% industry, and they had a niche market that was a point in time discussion that we asked them how they did it. They advised us not to try to do that because it would just be too difficult to get that funding through industry on its own, but we certainly think there's a play to be made to get some money into that conversation as a partnership.
You know, in the old days, I say the old days, it's probably about 6 or 7 years ago, you had a number of key partners, industry partners, you know, and they were your UColes, your mass universities, your Air New Zealands, you know, some of those bigger, broader, rather than linked to a particular project.
Yep.
Is there, and I know it's tough, but is there perhaps opportunities there?
I think there will be opportunities. I think I was listening to an economist the other day that said as sure as night follows day that 2025 should be better than 2024. So we're always optimistic that, you know, as the economic table turns a little bit and people see the value in having private money or, you know, corporate money involved in economic development, that we can certainly look to do those conversations. Certainly yesterday, again at the conference, had some great conversations with local partners around support of specific events like the Itapu conference as it rolls into a Food HQ event. But certainly I think there is a chance that as the economic downturn lifts a bit, that those conversations can continue.
And I just note on under your notes on page 57 that we've still got the Manawatu Events Trust, which is in hibernation but is still sitting there. Any thoughts on that? Just bearing in mind you've just spoken about quite a major event.
No, I can't really comment on that at the moment, but certainly happy to follow that up and come back to you.
Yeah, it was a vehicle where it enabled you as a organisation to get some, I suppose, more community and trust funding.
Okay.
Yeah, cool. Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. There's no more questions there. Thank you very much for coming in. So I'll look to move this, seconded by Councillor Wood, that the committee agreed to the final statement of intent submitted 2024-2025, submitted by the CEDA, that's been put in front of us. I just want to just say a comment to this. I think this is a really good statement of intent. It's nice and solid. It's got a lot of information. We've actually had it put in front of us for 3 months now, so it's a good solid report, and I think that there's a lot in it that we can see is going to happen for the next year. So thank you very much. CEDA's in good form, and it's good to see that going forward. So thank you very much for all the hard work you are doing and what you are going to do for the next year. I know you want to put it out for the next 3 years, but under what we have to do, it is a yearly one. So we will see you again. But thank you very much for the work that you do. And Amir would like to speak.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I agree. And thanks to CEDA, in good space. I think one thing I've noticed is the focus is crystal clear now. Obviously, business attraction and retention, that's skills which always needs to be honed, and the labour market, but also the 3 projects rather than just running with the hares and hunting with the hounds. We actually, and some of these projects are multi-year. The food strategy, for those that haven't noticed, we've got the Boma i Tipu New Zealand Agri Summit in town, and I can tell you it's been an interesting conversation, and we have attracted a wide range of national and the odd international person. That is the example of having the food strategy and some focus. Also to Tanganui, and I would just say that probably the sector, the industry needs to play a little bit more part to play, and I'm sure they will in time. And that was sort of honing out my questions around the funding of an EDA. Industry is somewhat missing in the mix, and I understand it's tough at the moment, and time will hopefully heal that. Also the other project is the Destination Management Plan, which CEDA had done a lot of work on and now is starting to bear some fruit. This city has a diverse economy, and last night the Mayor and I, the Deputy Mayor and I welcomed our Kunshan people here, and town was very, very busy. And also the accommodation sector was busy, and it's on the back of events and different things that are happening. It's not like that everywhere else. And if you watch TV this morning, apparently Queenstown's dead, Wellington's dead, and Auckland is dying. So Palmerston North's bucking the trend a little bit in that respect. But look, thank you, CEDA. I think we've got to have a focus on the economic side of things, but it would be good to see some shared responsibility there in time with industry, and perhaps a little bit more of the government, bearing in mind we know that the signals are probably not as rosy as they once were there. Thank you.
Thank you. The Deputy Mayor.
Tēnā koe, Madam Chair. O te rā tēnā tātou. Ngā mihi kia kōrua o CEDA, me ki mai koutou. I just want to make comment on saying thank you very much also for the work, the wonderful, authentic work you do and work with iwi across the board. And I know that there have been some wonderful initiatives that have come out of there that have promoted and given prominence to mana whenua, and I just want to congratulate you on that and all the other good work you do. Kia ora. Thank you.
Right, let's vote. That's passed, 14 votes for and none against. Move to item number 9, which is on page 6. Thank you very much, Jerry and Bobby.
Madam Chair and Councillors, the
So
report,
welcome.
you considered the draft of PNAL's SOI back in February, and this is the final one for your consideration. They've considered and updated theirs following the feedback from last time. So the report outlines the changes to be made, which are only relatively minor from my perspective. But if any questions, we've got the team here.
I'd just like to say welcome to Murray and David and Jonathan, and thank you, Steve, for that introduction. So, welcome. Would you like to now hand over to you?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Very little to say other than to re-emphasise that our statement of intent is very much structured to the needs of our community in terms of our travelling community, such that the customer experience is the focus of our terminal development plan. You'll see if you've been out there recently, of course, there's other changes too for the customer regarding parking, and we have some shorter term plans with that, increasing it, and license plate recognition, so they'll be implemented reasonably soon. Our ability to fund the new terminal is totally within our means. We can fund that without any requirement for additional funding from the shareholder. That's also true of commercial opportunities that we believe we have in front of us, and we'll be trying to maximise those as best we can over the years ahead. Other than that, Madam Chair, I think we're in for an exciting time, albeit there will be some disruption at our terminal, no doubt about that, and we'll be looking to minimise that as best we can. The plan that we've put in front of you, we've highlighted the changes from previous draft. They're relatively minor in the scheme of things, except as for timing. There are some timing aspects to it, such that there'll be less less debt borrowings next year, but that will be put out a few years later. We are, I believe, on track for the airport drive vesting, which should go through this year, and equally with that, a considerable, in our terms, considerable cash payment to the council. And you'll also note that in our plans we have factored in dividends into future years. That's it from me. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are you happy to take questions?
Certainly.
Just the first one from me. So when do you start demolishing the current terminal?
The latest thinking is October.
Okay, and that's when you'll start communicating that to the public?
Well before that. We will be starting some work within Valet in August, which won't affect the public. They won't see that, but our intention is to start the comms very soon.
Okay, great. Okay, the Mayor.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you, gentlemen. Just on page 87, couple of questions there, just really around the commercial side. Ruapahu Aero Park, there's a property strategy. What is that strategy, or is that being?
It's essentially the funding model that we'll adopt.
Okay. So there's no strategy on how you're going to sell, lease.
Well, that's a component of what we already do. We have a plan around our approach to development at Ruapahu Aero Park, which primarily is design build, lease back rather than sell.
Yeah.
But that specific reference in the KPIs, if you like, relates to the funding strategy that we'll deploy.
So if the strategy isn't working, do you review it?
Absolutely, everything in our business is reviewed in real time.
So do you think it's working?
Well, we're on the cusp of agreeing what that funding mechanism will be.
Okay. Okay, so do the shareholders have a look at that strategy at some stage?
Absolutely, they will.
Yeah, okay.
So our next step is to put it back to Wade's team.
Right, okay. And just the other one, and again, you may not be able to answer it because of commercial sensitivity, but the, again, around the Aero Park and freight warehousing, is that close?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
There's no further questions, so thank you very much for coming in. So I'll look to move that the committee agree to the statement of intent for Palmerston North Airport Limited 24-25 to 26-27 in attachment 2, seconded by Councillor Wood. And again, we have seen this in draft at the last economic growth meeting, so this is now signing off the official statement of intent. And we've also been out to the airport and had a good discussion with the airport company, so we're all on the same side. We all know what's going on, so I'm very happy to sign this off. I think we all know what's going on, so very happy. So thank you very much for keeping us updated. The Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, thanks to the Chair and the CE and officers there. Page 73, I think you need a plane in the image there. It's a nice sunset pic, but there's no plane. But no, in all seriousness, it's quite a, well, it is a monumental time for the airport company in the terms of what they have to do. 70 odd million is being spent around warehousing, improvements to airside capability, but also the terminal as well. We're starting to see air movement, whether it be freight or passengers, although it has been rocky, there we are starting to see some international visitors back to our shores, and Palmerston gets a reasonable share of that too. But quite exciting. The terminal development, I think, will be an interesting one to manage, having to keep it up, or half of it up, and then build one half and then demolish the the half you were in and then build the other half will be challenging. But it absolutely is needed. So thank you for the report, and we wish you well, because you're a gateway for our city, and with events and business and friends and family, leisure travellers. It's vital that we have a welcoming and functioning airport. So thank you.
Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the statement of intent. I have no problem approving it, but as far as some of the thinking to come through to this point is around the wider investment needed for the airport outside of what the council do, because it shows pretty readily that we'll start running out of resource for the development plans for Ruapehu Park if we don't get a wider investment. So I need to flag that point. The other one, and to get to this point too, while we're looking at 3 years financial figures, it's important to look at a wider view, and we've been able to do that with the airport board to see why we do the investment. We actually do recover back with the matching income to a point, but even then, without the wider investment, we start getting very limited. So with those 2 points made, that's all I wish to add. Thank you.
Thank you. There's no further comments, so we'll look to vote. That's passed 34 and 1 against. Okay, thank you. Moving on to the next item, which is item number 10 and page 97 of your. So Glenn, thank you, Glenn. So this is, as James is sick, so you're stepping in. Thank you for doing that. So this is about the Streets for People, is that right? Just a quick update, I'm sure.
Good morning, Madam Chair, councillors, Mr Mayor. Yes, that's correct, and apologies for my colleague who was unwell this morning. This is this monthly update for the Streets for People program of works. The key highlights I'll pick out of the report is that the steering group first met late February. Work now focuses on the Central City Indicative Business Case, so the CCIBC, to use the acronym, and that business case seeks to align the Centre City projects to a shared vision for the Centre City, and importantly help secure co-funding from NZTA. The next report from this Central City will be due in November. Happy to answer any questions.
For Councillor Anderson, so just to remind councillors that at this stage, the way that we voted through the long-term plan, Glenn, was that this was on hold for 3 years. Was that clear?
The indicative business case work will continue. Some of the items that were to be funded and constructed at the end of the business case have been put on hold. So the timing for the business case is minimal. Timing changes.
So the work that has been done now has that been funded?
That's through current funding.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question with the stage 1 and 2 works, or stage 1 and 1A works that we did from the plaza through to the coffee club. The treatment that we put in there, is there any protective surfacing that's been coated on the tiles to protect it from staining?
I will have to confirm after the meeting. I've got no knowledge of that, and I'm just looking for a nod, but not getting one, so I'll confirm.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just following up your questions really about the impact of the LTP decisions, and noting the next steps CCIBC continues and there's a 6-monthly update in November. Is there any plan to report back on the outcome of the CCIBC to this committee, which would then give us the opportunity to consider any unintended consequences of those funding decisions?
Certainly it is an intent to report back to the table.
And do you have a time frame on that?
Sorry, I don't. I'll have to confirm with my colleague, and we'll put something out after the meeting.
Okay, but we'll capture that into the committee work schedule. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Glenn. So I will look to move that the committee receive the report, memorandum titled City Centre Information Transformation Streets of People 6-monthly update, presented to the committee on the 19th of June and seconded by Councillor Wood. There's a lot to comment on this paper because of the consequences of our decisions, so I think I'd like to just leave it at that at the moment. And there's a comment there. The Mayor.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'll fill the gap for you. So look, thanks, Glenn, for taking the hospital past there. Look, I still think this work is needed, but as we did the LTP deliberations, there was a clear message from submitters and the public that they saw this as perhaps something that could be pushed a bit further down the track. But for the vitality reasons of your central city, I think it is needed at some stage. Unfortunately, we didn't start well. officers that are no longer here, massively overspent on the first couple of stages, and we blew a big part of the budget already. And it took a lot of convincing of building owners and retailers that we were doing the right thing. But I still believe that we need to do that work. And also, maybe a rescope is needed. Not everything's broken. The paving down Broadway is not. We'd be ripping up perfectly good paving. But does it need a clean? Absolutely. Does it need perhaps a very simple makeover? Absolutely. And I think some of that work can probably happen under existing budgets. Building owners need to take responsibility as well about cleaning. So if you walked down Broadway or around the square, just have a look up and just have a look at some of the building and the state of some of the buildings. Broken gutters, mould, paint coming off. Now, some of that needs to be addressed, and maybe there does need to be a little bit of a campaign around getting people to clean up their own buildings. Just next door to us, excuse me, the old Guardian building there is going to get a clean from a drone, and you'll see that happening in the next couple of days or week or so. And that is where we can start to make a bit of a difference, or suggest to. And I think of things like the T&G Tower or building, where it desperately needs a clean, and it perhaps needs to be cleaned professionally rather than the owner standing on a ladder with a brush. So I think there's lots that we can do. The bid and the chamber have a role here too, but the city centre bus terminal, again, that's ongoing, but that's only one part of this. It's not all of it, but it's an important part, but it's only one part of it. But look, I'm okay with it being delayed, but we do need to keep doing some low-level stuff to make sure that the city doesn't fall back into a sleepy hollow, and we keep it vibrant. But that responsibility can be shared with the owners and the building owners and tenants as well. Thank you.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did just really want to comment on that city centre indicative business casework that you've been part of with the Mayor as well. I've been really impressed by the opportunities we've had through those discussions, collaboratively with community, business and government funding partners, as well as Horizons Regional Council, to start to put together a community of interest around what we see as the needs for our central city. Those themes that have come out about vibrancy, accessibility and safety, I don't think anybody is disagreeing with those as the issues that face our central city. The bigger question becomes, how do we address those issues? And it was recognised through the LTP debate that social licence is an issue across lots and lots of projects at the moment. This is a sensible time to take the pause that the budgeting has required of us now, or will do when we sign off next week. But I'd hate to see us lose the momentum that we're starting to build in this space. And I think it's really important that we understand how we attract funding into the work that we want to do that does have good support from our community, and especially our business community, around things like when we look at the bus station or what the rescope of those Streets for People projects look like. So a little bit sad to see this one slow, but that's I think that's an opportunity as well at this point to make sure we get it right and we take our community with us. So I look forward to seeing that outcome of the CCIBC come back to your committee, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Just as a right of reply, I think somebody misinterpreted my words on this, because I have always fully supported this and supported it in the long-term plan as well. So when I said it was on a go slow, it was on a go slow because of the outcome of the long-term plan. And that wasn't my support for that, but it was more about it's the way it is because it's what happened through the long-term plan process. Fully support what's happening with that business case, which Councillor Bowen brought up, and I still think we can carry on with that. That would be good, because there are people that are involved in that business case that are very supportive of this process. And if we have to look to try and get funding from other avenues, then that's a better way to do it. So let's now look to vote. Thank you. It's passed 13 votes for and none against. Right, moving on to item number 12, which is Tamakuku. Oh no, is that the right one? Oh, sorry, number 11, sorry. Sorry about that, Glenn. Number 11, which is 101. Thank you, Glenn.
Madam Chair, councillors, Mr Mayor, the report in front of us today details the progress update on the city-wide street lighting infill, and by infill we essentially mean where we're improving dim or dark spots in our city where our current street lights are situated. The program has been completed. The program of works for the year has been completed. There is a list of streets in the attachment that we completed this current year. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Go to Councillor Johnson online.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you fine.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Glenn. My question is, when the programme of works to deal with the lack of compliance was put together, and I understand that was before your time, all of the non-compliant streets were meant to be included. So I don't quite understand how we've got to the end of it, and now we've got a long list from contractors of other non-compliant areas. Can you explain how that's happened?
I don't actually have the background on your question, councillor. What I can say is that Office has initiated more work to identify future streets that could be candidates for improved lighting, and that is a list that we've got on the back of the attachment.
Okay. Yeah. Let me put it another way. What are the areas of non-compliance that the contractors think still need addressing in the list that they're given us?
Broadly speaking, the areas of non-compliance are when if...
I think Bryce wants to help you.
Yeah, kia ora, councillors. Bryce Hosking, today Acting Chief Infrastructure Officer. I can perhaps shed a little bit of light on the difference between the non-compliance and then the list of potential future streets. So the ones on that list, I guess, will technically not be non-compliant. So they are compliant at the moment. However, they are streets that we've identified perhaps are not as, or a little bit more dimmer lit than maybe would be ideal, and hence being put forward as an opportunity for the future as opposed to a requirement through compliance.
Okay. Oh well, that makes a bit more sense. But what is the nature of the work that might need to be undertook? I mean, is it tree trimming? Is it additional poles going up? And what is the nature of the improvements that will be required?
I could take this one as well. Potentially a little bit of both. There will definitely need to be some additional lighting installed and new poles, but yes, street tree trimming and the likes will also play a role in there. So every street will be a little bit different, but it'll be a bit of both.
Okay, and just sorry, Madam Chair, last question. Have we had complaints from residents in those streets that they don't consider that their lighting is sufficient?
Not sure about whether we've had complaints. As part of our street light audit that we got Fulton Hogan to do when we were determining what lights were out around the city, these were primarily the streets that identified in their night survey that were a bit more dim lit and hence being put forward. And that's why I say they're not. It's not necessarily a compliance issue, it's just that they're a bit dimmer than ideal. Probably the other clarification I'll just say is if it's street tree trimming, we will have sufficient budget to address that currently, but we do not have any budget for additional poles at this stage.
Sorry, having said that was my last question, I've just got one more. Were measurements taken, Bryce, of the lighting, or was it more of a subjective kind of an assessment?
That one I'm not sure of. We would have to come back to you with that, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I was going to ask the same question about the subjectivity, so thank you. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It was a question about the next steps part of the report, where you said if we wanted to extend it, then additional capital new funding would be required to deliver this. Has that been scoped at all?
Councillor, we're still in the process of scoping that work. We've got the list of streets. We haven't gone through and identified what's the priorities and how much that would in fact cost.
Okay, so once that's been scoped, what would the process be then?
Once it had been scoped and ranked, we could provide some more information on the costs.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Glenn and Bryce. Just a quick mop-up question, really. So, in terms of the 61 streets which are indicated as potentially require more street lighting, do we have an understanding of the length of time it would take us to actually do that work?
The length of time to do that work would be a function of the budget and how much budget we could do. In an ideal world, we could do them all straight away, but we would get the costings and then we'd bring something back about the available budgets.
And it's anticipated this is cap new funding?
Yes, potentially we could secure co-funding from NZTA through the RLTP process.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Zabellin.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks again. My question's really similar to Councillor Hancock's, which is that we've signalled that potentially $1 million per annum might cover this. I'm just wondering how many years we might be looking at. Maybe 6.
We haven't done that level of detail work, Councillor.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Glenn. Just building off of Councillor Johnson's and Bowen's questions, you talk about work being scoped and costed and brought back here. Would the basis of that work be the relatively informal observations that are in attachment 1 based on a single contractor's migrations through the city, or would there actually be a proper survey of where there are deficits?
We'd need to do some consideration work around that, Councillor. A proper survey would have some budget implications. To survey the whole city would be a substantial sum of money. Currently, it's more, I understand, on observations from night drives.
So how much comfort could we have in an approach that was simply based on observations versus actually, understanding the need in the community and then responding to it in a structured way?
Certainly, the more formal process would give us a better indication of what the city could benefit from with increased lighting. We haven't done the work on the scope of what that cost would be to develop that program.
So would there be some information brought to us about cost of doing a proper survey before we would launch into the whole costing of what may or may not be the right scope of work?
Yes, there would be.
Great, thank you. Just wanted to understand for myself too, just trying to reconcile the statement in 1.2, paragraph 1.2 and 2.2, where 1.2 says the final work package was completed, and then 2.2 refers to ongoing work that's scheduled to be completed in FY25. So are there additional streets within the existing program of work still to be completed in the coming financial year?
Apologies, councillor, that's an error. Where I've written 24-25, it should be the final one is completed this current year.
Great. That's so within a week's time, all done.
Correct.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Just wanted to follow up too, just around, I know there's been some discussion previously around the keeping the lights on side of this thing, and still noting a significant number of individual lights that are out and entire streets that are out in the city. Could you or somebody be in a position to give us an update on what's being done to address that and what we might be able to expect through winter?
Certainly. We're currently awaiting a delivery of, I want to say, 300 luminaires, the bulbs, the lights from our supplier. That has taken a little bit longer than what we would have hoped. They will be installed as soon as we can get them. Certainly, we've got some areas, some blocks of lights that are currently out that we're working with the network suppliers to find the faults and make sure we can get those lights back on as soon as possible. Typically, where there's a block or a number of lights out in a stretch, it's likely that's a network fault. So we work with our suppliers to get that cleared up as soon as we can.
Thanks. Do we have any information on the typical timeframes to resolve those network faults or those entire blocks that are out? Acknowledging that it's not necessarily our issue, it would still be useful to know kind of how long it's actually taking from identification of a dark street through to getting the lights back on.
I don't have that data with me, councillor, but we can look in and provide something.
Great, that would be helpful. And just the 300 lights or luminaires that are on the way, is that because there's 300 out in the city, or is that a little bit of buffer so that when 300 and when the next one goes out, we actually have the light here?
I understand, and I'll look at my colleague Bryce in the background, but I understand these are the 300 lights that were funded by council earlier this calendar year to catch up with some of the lights that are out in the city.
Yeah, I can build on that. A majority of those 300, the vast majority of them are looking to replace lights that are currently out. And this is the last. We've replaced some of the ones that were earlier identified when council gave us additional funding, using whatever stock we had. And this will hopefully, once we're all done, that should resolve all of the lights that were identified as being out in the city.
Thanks. So is the approach of council to not have any lights in town and just always wait for global supply chains that are terribly disrupted while we're in the dark?
We'd always like to have stock on hand to be able to change the luminaires when they fail, councillor. So we need to get into that situation.
Is there anything that's needed from the council table to enable us to keep a stock of light bulbs in this city, or can we delegate that to officers?
One of the steps we're taking in the new or under the maintenance contract is the night drives we haven't been undertaking, where we can drive and have an accurate, up-to-date information of exactly how many luminaires are out in our network. Work through the issues of the supply versus the maintenance side of it. Then we'll have an improved handle on exactly where we are.
Thank you. Given that this is wrapping up a significant program of work around doing infill lighting, will there be continued regular reporting to council around addressing the issues around lights going out and blocks of lights going out, or how's that going to be reported back to the community as getting on top of that problem?
Certainly, under the maintenance contract, we have a regular reporting regime. I'm just looking for my colleague for a nod, but I believe it's every 6 months. Getting a nod. Every 6 months we'll report back, and certainly this will be a key highlight that we'll have in the report and I'll answer questions on.
Great, thank you. Thanks for answering the extensive set of questions there, Madam Chair.
Yep, we've done a recommendation which we'll put up and show you now, following on for your questions and from other questions, that the Chief Executive report back on a citywide survey on street lights and timing and costs for lighting upgrades on the streets listed in Appendix 1, to follow up on your questions and others' questions because of the concerns. Yes, Councillor Barrett?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just wondering if you and the seconder might be prepared to have some language in there that was specific around the replacement of luminaires that are out, and understanding that we keep a stock. Like, I fully support what you got there, but I think it needs to be broadened in scope to include both of the issues.
Replacement as well. So what you're saying, put replacement too? And replacement. Yep.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks.
Yep. And Councillor Arnott, you've been waiting patiently. I just wanted to put that in so that was covering off what you were asked, because we were thinking the same thing. Okay, Councillor. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for that extra recommendation. I've got a street light outside my house which has just failed again, the third time in 2 years. Do you think the city has a problem with lights being fixed going out again pretty soon after?
Councillor, one of the realities with street lights is that they can be fixed and have a recurring fault. Sometimes it can be a combination of factors. Certainly when you upgrade and put in new LEDs, there is a percentage that fail or don't quite connect or don't quite do what they should do. If there was a recurring issue, that's when there'd be major concern.
I'll log the job, thank you.
Okay, that's all the questions we've got for this. Now, we'll look to move these recommendations together. I don't think there's anyone got an issue with that. Oh, sorry. Councillor Johnson, do you want a question or comment? Comment, okay. Yep, so we will look to move those, and now we'll move into comment. I just know this report's really important to all of our residents across the city because lighting is so important for safety reasons, as many of you have brought that up. And there are many streets in the city that still, I think this is quite a subjective area, and I do want, and that's why I think this is really important so we can understand how lighting is assessed. And I think Councillor Johnson was bringing that up in her comments, because I think we do need to understand how lighting in streets is assessed as to why it gets replaced. So thank you for that. Thank you for bringing that up, Councillor Johnson, but I'll go to you now because you've been waiting for a while. Thank you, Councillor Johnson.
Chair, just to make a few comments. The first one is that I guess I've learnt more over the years about street lighting than perhaps I would care to know. And it's clear that it's not just about the spacing of the poles, but there are other factors that affect the lighting in the street. So I am concerned that we've got a fairly, and I think Councillor Barrett used the word subjective, a fairly subjective opinion from the contractor about dark streets, because it's very much a time of year issue. If you did a similar sort of survey in the summertime, there would be even more dark streets because of the leaves on the trees. So I would like us to develop, or if we don't need to develop it, if there's a standard, I would like us to do some actual measurements, to have some specific objective measures as to the level of lighting in the street. I understand that we might have completed the compliance issues, but if we've still got areas of the city that are dark, then those need to be addressed. And you know, this has gone on, I really, as you probably all know, feel quite strongly about this. This has gone on long enough, I think, really. I think it's taken us 8 years to get to this point. It's pretty much all the time I've been on council. And we've still got a list, if it's to be verified objectively, we've still got a list of a large number of streets where let's say that the lighting is suboptimal. So I would like to see some more objective measurements, some better information about what is the type of issue that needs to be addressed. Is it the spacing of the light poles? Is it the strength of or the direction of the luminaires? Is it the street tree trimming? What is it exactly that needs to be addressed here? The other thing that I would like to see reported back is if we're still getting complaints from residents, because I mean, I know that my phone and my email was running red hot at one point, and I mean, we had residents in the chamber every week. I haven't heard anything recently. Is that because people have just given up complaining, or are people still raising the issue of dark patches in the street? So, I mean, I think there's a lot of factors here that need to be considered. Objective measurements, time of year, what exactly is it that we need to be doing to upgrade the lighting in the streets? What are the complaints from residents? And all of that needs to come back to us before we could reasonably consider whether or not we wanted to put extra budget to it and how much. And the other thing that I would like to hear back from is whether or not we could actually get co-funding from Waka Kotahi, because if memory serves me, we couldn't get any co-funding for any of these upgrades to meet compliance. So there's a lot more information that we're going to need before we can come to any decision making on whether or not additional budget might or might not be needed and what that budget might be. But just to sort of round up, I would say that for new councillors in particular, this has been a very good lesson, I would say. We were offered, a good amount of co-funding. It looked like it would be something that would add value, that would help us to reduce energy consumption, etc., etc. But in the end, it's turned out to be a much more complicated issue and much harder to achieve decent lighting in the city through this change than we might ever have imagined. And I think it's almost a case study that you could write up and put in front of new councillors and new infrastructure officers as they came in to say, beware, buyer beware. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Councillor Zabellan.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just along the lines of Councillor Barrett's questions about keeping a stock of luminaires in supply, I'm very pleased to see that added to the second recommendation, because I thought that was the plan, and I'm happy to be corrected if I've got that wrong, but I was under the impression that the contractor would be maintaining a supply of replacement stock so that we can be responsive when we do have outages, and that the reason for that was that the contractor could get better procurement options, perhaps to buy in bulk than we could. So I'm really surprised that that doesn't seem to be happening. So I recall the last time that we asked about this, the answer related to that there was different types of luminaire head units and it was difficult to pin down what was our preferred type. So there was some setbacks to really pushing ahead with that, and that made that difficult. And this answer sort of doesn't really seem to pick up on that. So anyway, I just wanted to comment that I thought that was the plan, that we would be having a stock and a supply for these situations. And I understand I'm a bit worried that that doesn't seem to be the plan anymore. So very pleased to see that added in there, and I'm looking forward to seeing what it says. Thanks.
Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just brief comment. Who knew it was so hard to keep the lights on, right? I mean, it's like eating up a huge amount of council effort and time, but it is certainly something that is essential to get right. So I'm glad that we're continuing to press as long and as hard as we need to get this sorted out. A little bit tempering some of Councillor Johnson's comments. I think that we should also recognize the significant cost savings that were achieved by switching over to LEDs, and that's taken hundreds of thousands of dollars a year out of our OPEX, which has been very nice, but yes, it has left us with some capital expenditure deficits, so we're still years and years into the filling process. Really appreciate, Madam Chair, you putting forward the additional recommendation, and in particular, what is now first and third elements of those. I am a little bit concerned that the second element potentially takes us into chasing up something that we don't really know that we have the basis for. I think if each of us took an hour and drove around the city, we would all have very different lists of actually all the problem streets and problem spaces. And my concern is that we've had some contractors spending a few hours driving around the city. And I very much want to know that we have a comprehensive approach here, because certainly there's a number of streets that, in my experience, are still in the significant deficit category that have appeared nowhere on Appendix 1. And I would very much want us to work from a basis of full information, even if it does mean that there are greater costs and greater investments needed to actually sort the problem out. So do appreciate that, you know, officers have taken a proactive stance here and bringing us some observations from contractors, and that the contractors are prepared to share those observations with our staff. But I do not think that that is a substitute for actually a proper survey that gets us onto understanding the needs across the entire city and how we respond to that. So I'll be particularly looking forward to the information in the first and third components of that recommendation, and be a little bit probably tempered around where we go with the second component until we see those others. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's look to vote. That's passed, 13 votes for and none against. Thanks, everybody. We are going to go to item 12, which is Makuku Terrace 6 monthly update on page 105. Councillor Denison.
Madam Chair, I might just declare an interest and withdraw from this until I get further advice. Thank you.
Did you forget to do that at the beginning of the meeting? Thank you. Welcome, Bryce. And
Yes, this is my colleague Anna Saunders, who's the Council's project manager working on Tamakuku. So kia ora, councillors, and very happy to be able to present this report to you today. You know, probably in particular interested in the sales front. And definitely we have seen an improvement in the market from probably the last report I presented on this, where we were in a situation where sales were very slow through most of 2023, and despite a number of parties' efforts to try and improve that, that was the economic environment we were working within. However, since that time, and I'm very pleased to report over the last 6 months, we have seen quite a notable increase in that, both in terms of interest through working with the group builders and the our sales partners and real estate agents, but also it's been a very steady run of sales too. So 12, well actually now as of yesterday, 13 sales confirmed in the last 6 months, and it really has been pretty steady of sort of 2 a month over that period as well. So it's not like we had a little run of them where we did 8 in a month and then plenty of months with zeros. So it has been pretty steady. At risk of speaking for my colleague Anna here, she's actually just met with the group builders on site, and it sounds like there's also quite a bit of interest, continued interest for some new sections as well moving forward, which is also promising. So happy to take any questions, and go from there.
just to start with, this update from Bailey's that we've got on our desks, where did that come from?
It came from Bailey's.
Yeah, I understand that, but it was just appeared on our desk, so there's no explanation. You haven't given any explanation for it?
Apologies. I sent it out through the... we'd had a couple of questions in terms of how Bailey's were feeling in terms of progress, and I sent that out via councillor help late yesterday. Apologies if it didn't find its way to you, and apologies for it being very late in the piece, but really supplementary, supporting information to the information in the report more than anything.
So is Jack going to be joining us at the meeting because he's the author of this document?
No. Bailey's provide us regular vendor reports as our real estate agent, and just to let us know how things are going and the work that they're doing, and that information can purely be treated as supplementary supporting information, basically backing up what we've put in the report.
So if we have a question to Jack,
If you have a question for Jack, happy for you to ask it to us, and we can take it to him and get you a response directly.
thank you for that clarification. Right, let's start with the questions. The Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Anna. Thanks, Bryce. So, how many sections in stage 2? Has that been decided?
Yeah, there was 35 planned.
35. And so I note under 4, the budget and the program work streams that you're going out to tender on that, and you've got a rough QS. I presume it's a QS number of what that may be. 6 million odd, is that right?
Yep, correct. So that's based on a QS. We actually have did the tender interviews yesterday with the tenderers, so that report would be due to come to you in early August.
Okay. And is that everything, or is that just civils?
No, that was for everything. In particular, sort of split into 3 components: the pipe going from our pond down to the lower Oxbow, the earthworks, and then the civil work.
Okay, so that leads me to my next question. So, and realise things have obviously changed, but with completed settlements in total, the surplus from stage 1 is, am I reading this right, 6.43 million, is that right?
Completed settlements, so that's money in our bank. People have actually paid the dollars. Yes, that's currently sitting in our bank account. We have a few sales on top of that are conditional upon a few things and haven't quite settled yet.
Okay. What's the what would be the surplus of stage 1? When does it? What is all sections sold? Everyone's paid. We've paid all our bills. What is the completed?
The table in 3.6 probably is where we tried to articulate that. So we have, as of the time of writing this report, out of 79 sections, we had 48 unsold. By the time if we sell all 79 at their listed price, we would be looking to create $24.8 million of revenue, less costs on that, and that'll be a profit. So we're probably looking circa $9 million based on the figures in this report.
Okay. So then what is stage 2? Because this is the whole reason we're doing this. What is stage 2 going to net revenue? Net revenue.
We do have those figures. They're not included in this report. I would be anticipating we bring all of that information in the tender award report on the 7th of August to provide you all of that information to help make your decision.
Can I ask you to do that? Because
Absolutely.
It's pretty important, actually. In fact, it's vitally important. Okay, I'll leave the rest to comment. Thank you.
Councillor Wood. Hold on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got a number of questions. I hope you don't mind. Thank you, Tim. I just wanted to start on page 107. There's some slightly conflicting information in the report. On page 107 in table 3.6, it says there's 31 sections under contract as at 31st of May. However, you turn the page to 111, it says there's 31 sold. So I just wanted some clarity there. Have we got 31, or what proportion of those 31 are sold versus under contract?
31 are definitely under contract. They are not all unconditional and settled. The 31 under contract is worth 9.3. However, the table in 3.1 shows that we've had 6.1 43 of settled properties. Exactly how many out of those 31 are under contract, I would just have to confirm for you. It's about 8 or 9, I believe, are conditional or have not yet settled.
Okay, so in the previous page where it says we've sold 12 in the last 6 months, it doesn't actually mean we've sold 12. It means we might have sold 3 and 8 are under contract. Am I reading that? Am I understanding you correctly, or?
Majority of those 12 are unconditional contracts.
Okay.
However, yes, I think there might be 2 or 3 out of that 12 that are working with the group builder and they're just waiting on confirming something with their client.
Okay, well, perhaps next time it might be useful to have that distinction. Of those 12 in the last 6 months, how many are individuals versus how many are companies? Do we know? Okay, did Genian Homes buy 8 of them, or were they more sales to mum and dad buyers?
The majority of them, the vast majority of them, are through the group builders. Some of those were in partnership with Bailey's, so they were a joint approach where people came through an open home and they put them in touch with, say, a Genian Homes, and they worked through a package together. The current sales environment and lending environment, it's definitely a much easier route to be getting to secure a bank loan if you've got a turnkey product as opposed to just buying a section, and so that partnership with some of those group builders has proved to be pretty crucial.
Awesome. How many of the built homes have been sold? So, okay, are there any people actually living at Tamakuku Terrace yet?
I think all but maybe one show home of actually built houses have actually been sold, and if they don't have someone living in them, they will very, very soon.
Thank you. On page 111, the map there talks about upcoming release. Does that refer to titles? Is that we've got titles coming up for release?
Yeah, apologies. That plan is originally when we completed stage 1, the sales environment we were in, we were looking to release sections in batches to help spread the demand around, because at that time it would be fair to say that the market was in a very different place than it is now. Essentially, all 79 sections in stage 1 are currently available for purchase.
Awesome. Moving on to a slightly different line, just as one of the new councillors, what was the purpose originally intended for Tamakuku Terrace? Was it a social goal of providing more land for people to purchase and build, or was it a commercial goal of generating revenue, or was it a mix of both? Okay, why are we doing this?
It was never intended to be a social housing development, so there's a clear distinction there. There was a focus on providing affordable options for the public. Definitely a goal was the opportunity around creating revenue from this process. At that time, there was a direction that ideally we would be looking to sell directly to mums and dads and directly to purchasers, and giving them the opportunity of choice. Where we are in the market, that sales plan has slightly changed now, and we're looking to, we've pivoted to work a lot more closely with some of the group builders to get the outcomes we're looking for.
Thank you. I might ask some design questions then. What's Veros's ongoing role in the project? I see that they're who you would submit a design plan to, for example. So what's their role with the development now?
Veros were our development partner, essentially our specialist project manager on the project. For stage 1, I acted as the program manager managing that relationship, and now Anna is fulfilling that role, helping us to work through some of the complexities of the project. Their continuing involvement through into stage 2 will be in a similar capacity, acting as a project manager to work closely with them to help mitigate some of the risks and ensure the project is delivered successfully.
Thank you. Who's the design review board? I appreciate other councils might already know this, but I note that all designs are reviewed by a design review board. Is that Veros, or is that council, or is that a mix of both?
It's a mixture of both. Council's urban design function, Dave Charnley, plays a role in that space, as does our regulatory team, and also Veros play a role there too. I think it'd be fair to say most of the designs are fully compliant and make their way through. They're in line with the district plan, and so most of them, if not all but all, have found their way through that process pretty quickly.
Thank you. In what way are our design requirements enforced? So the design guidelines state that it's through covenants on the title, but I just want to understand if it's through covenants or if it's through the resource consent conditions on the properties.
There are covenants on the properties themselves. This is a topic that's had a number of questions in the past. The requirements around design predominantly line up with what getting a consent process looks like anyway. So there's a couple of idiosyncrasies around how how far back from the roadside the property is, and some of those kind of requirements, how far from the boundaries and the likes. But most of that stuff is items that they would be working through from a design, building consent, resource consent process anyway.
So asking about those idiosyncrasies, I see that our design requirements say explicitly no hip roofs are permitted to be visible from the street as an example. What negative social outcomes does a hip roof at the Tamakuku Terrace development promote?
I don't think it's about creating negative social outcomes. I agree with you. I don't think they're creating any. It's really around trying to create I guess a neighbourhood that functions and looks and provides a certain level of aesthetics through that process. Working with the group builders, for instance, the plans that people have been signing off, they were relatively in line with their current designs anyway, so it hasn't really, when we've had these questions in the past and spoken to the group builders, the feedback we'd had was typically it was adding $5,000 or less to the actual build product in terms of actually complying with these matters. In some cases, not at all.
Thank you. And so I'll only ask one other example, but I note on the planting species list it's quite particular. So, for example, could somebody plant a rose bush in their front garden if they wanted to, or would that be prohibited given it's not an allowed plant under this?
Currently in the front of the property, yep, there is a planting list, and so a rose bush would not be compliant with it.
Okay. Can council change these design requirements if we chose to?
We could. My caution to that would simply be that the purchasers who have currently purchased in that essentially have bought into the neighbourhood and have bought in under these pretences, and they've bought into the subdivision as such and are compliant. If we were to remove some of those requirements, say, in an extreme version, whether that would impact their view on what they've purchased so far, I'm not sure.
Thank you. And my final question is, when I asked the other day for the vendor report feedback that council's been receiving, I was informed that the PNCC hasn't received any vendor report feedback. Your answer earlier said that we have, but is this what you're referring to? Or as councillors, are we able to get a copy of all of the vendor report and viewer feedback that we've been receiving over the last 2 or 3 years?
Early on, we were receiving written ones. The practice in recent times is that's moved to a verbal update from Bailey's. In light of this report, we asked for them to formalise it through in writing, and that's the one you've got in front of you.
So, given Bailey's collect records of everybody that views the property and what their feedback was, could we request that so that councillors can see the feedback from those who've been looking at the subdivision?
Absolutely, we can request that.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. I think that's the longest set of questions we've ever heard. Right, we'll go to the next person, which is Councillor Fitzgerald.
Well, thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Bryce, and thanks, Anna. Just quickly, have you seen the actual sale dates of the last 12 sections sold in the last 6 months?
Sorry, Councillor, can you repeat?
So, obviously in Jack's report and also in the officers' reports, you're reporting that in the last 6 months, 12 sections have sold at Tamakuku.
Yes.
And you've actually seen the actual sale dates of those 12 sections? You have?
Absolutely, they're coming through as sale and purchase agreements, and they've been signed off by the CE as per this delegation.
Fabulous. Just I'm looking at a Real Estate Institute report of all sales section sales in Palmerston North, 1st of March to 4th of June. There have been 4 recorded, but none of them are Tamakuku.
A lot of that comes down to settlement dates and when things have settled. So in some cases, especially with some of the group builders, we've offered them some deferred settlements in some cases, and hence some of that delay in terms of costs coming through into our bank versus actually confirmed sales. And I would say a lot of that comes down to timing as opposed to anything else.
For sure, because on the report it gives you the date the agreement was sold, the sale date and the settlement date as well.
Yes, and they get regular reports through from the real estate agents around the country. They tend to submit reports through to that, and that updates their figures on what they're doing. So once those are collated and updated, then RENZ tends to then publish them accordingly.
Wonderful. Thanks for your question. Thanks.
The Mayor.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Bryce. Look, just further to Councillor Wood's question, are design boards, is that normal commercial practice, or are we designing something here?
It is common, well, it is more common around the country. It would be fair to say there is not a lot of it in Palmerston North historically. I guess just to clarify what that process is, it's a very minor step in the resource consenting process. It's not particularly onerous. It's simply asking that the designs be submitted through for approval on the way through, which actually helps to make the consenting process a little bit quicker because they're no longer needing to speak to the vendor. We've pre-done that.
Okay. Does it go down, I mean, I've had a little bit of experience. I've never heard that you can't plant a rose bush.
Yep.
So
people can request an exemption, so it is possible. So we have signed off, for instance, on a couple where, in order to get the outcome someone was looking for from a layout perspective, we've agreed to it being slightly closer to the boundary by half a metre or whatever it may be, a slightly different placed plantings and the like. So we have the ability to approve a variation to it.
Yeah.
It's really just trying to maintain the integrity of the subdivision, and it helps to prevent, for instance, you couldn't just buy a section and rock up in a caravan, for instance.
Yeah, no, I realise that, and there's got to be balance, absolutely. So why have some group builders just said they just can't build in that subdivision? And I mean national group builders. I'm not talking about what you term locals.
No, absolutely. Well, look, I've heard that feedback as well around the city and some of the national group builders having some issues around consentable builds. And whilst I'm limited probably in terms of what I can say at a city-wide level, we are actively working with a number of those at the moment, and at least 3 of them have designs that they are regularly putting through at Tamakuku, including the JPAC, Ginian, have been 2 of the more active ones, but we are working.
Yeah, they're more. Yeah, some of those are more localised, but yes. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Bryce. I'll leave it to comments. Thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And a couple questions. First, cannot resist to follow up on some of Councillor Wood's excellent questions. If a rose were to blossom in this subdivision, what enforcement action would be taken?
It's a very good question. Look, in reality, if someone complied with the design and in 10 years' time they decided to plant a rose bush, would there be any kind of comeback on them? Probably not, if I'm honest. As I said, it's really from a trying to just maintain the best design outcomes we can for the subdivision. As I said, we have approved some variations to that. It's really from the outset trying to do that. Is there any kind of enforcement upon them? Well, probably not in the long term, but that's also not really what we're trying to get into either. That definitely is not the intention of it. And I think it would probably also, as part of this answer, just be worth noting that we have explored this with the agents and the group builders on a number of occasions to try and understand, was this proving, especially through 2023 when sales were very sluggish, was this actually a barrier? And had we over-prescribed something? And the feedback that we were getting was definitely that that was not the case and it wasn't being viewed as that. And once people worked through that process, we'd worked through that, and that was the feedback we were getting at the time.
Thank you for that. I guess then to your point around buyers having expectation that they're buying into a certain set of design standards, and then your current answer, which is that things are likely to evolve over time. Do you think that that's something that buyers are comfortable with in this particular case and aware of?
I think so. That's natural for any development. What you buy into in 10, 20 years' time, neighbourhoods change and things change. So I think that's a fair assumption that people are comfortable with that.
Thank you. The other question that I had was around some commentary that I've heard before around the kind of diversity of section sizes influencing the saleability of either some or all of the sections, and was just interested in the map on page 111 there. Does that map inform us at all in terms of whether there are or aren't relationships between the saleability of different section sizes?
This map probably doesn't, but we do definitely have that information in terms of the sections that have sold, what sizes are there, we did try something a little bit different, I think it's fair to say, when we designed this subdivision, and we did go for some smaller sections, and we tried to push the boundaries a little bit and break the mould. As all the sections haven't yet sold, naturally some of the more traditional sized ones were very quick to go, and they probably were a lot easier from a stock standard standpoint. We're starting to get now into some of the smaller sections, and it will be interesting to see how that affects it. The group builders have been working quite closely with us to look at some really good designs on small sections. So rather than just trying to put the same 4-bedroom house on a small section that they might have done on a 750 square metre section, they're actually looking to work quite hard with us around some of those kind of designs to get good outcomes, which has been fantastic to see.
Great. Could that information come into the next 6 monthly report?
Absolutely, and I'm happy to appendicize some of that kind of work as well to give you a bit more detail.
Great. Thank you to both. Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Bryce and Anna. That's all the questions we've got for you today. Councillor Wood, would you like to talk to both recommendations?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Also, thank you for indulging me. I apologise, councillors, for the lengthy questions, but often we brush through this item quite quickly, so I think it's time that we give it a little bit of scrutiny and have a look at how our development is performing. Happy to move both of these. My view is that this development is too hard for the average person, and that's what's been reflected by officers today. We've seen that the majority of the sales we've seen recently have been to companies. In fact, the sales we've seen across the entire development have been to companies, despite an initial intention of this being a development that would be possible for mum and dads to get a foot in the door because the sections will be smaller and more affordable. By the way in which we have done this development, the way in which we've engineered the design, we've just made it too hard for the average person. And that's why we're seeing land and build packages becoming more possible, because it's only experienced design experts who are able to navigate the model we've set up here. And so I've put together a recommendation which doesn't ask for us to make a call today that we reduce the design requirements and expectations we have on the sections, but asks us to get the information back of what that would look like at our next committee meeting so we can make a call in that space. I touched on a few of those examples in my question. So one is the explicit prohibition of hip roofs. is one example where we have many beautiful properties around the city which have a hip roof. That just means that you've got 4 triangles rather than 2 triangles. Rather than a gable, you've got effectively a pyramid on the roof, but we've prohibited that. We've got an exclusive fauna and flora list, which means that if somebody wanted to buy it and put a rose garden in, that would be prohibited. And officers answered questions that, oh, well, we probably wouldn't take them to court in breach of covenants over them having a rose. Well, then why do we have that rule there in the first place if we're not going to enforce it? Because all it serves to do is scare off potential purchasers and potential people who might not even come to us because they've been frightened by the long list of requirements. There's other things in there. There's explicit rules around cladding. I mean, I encourage any council, you can just search Taumakuku and look at the design guidelines online. Letterboxes must be incorporated in the front boundary treatment and located adjacent to direct footpath access between building and street. So we're engineering this down to where the letterboxes can and can't be and how they must be done. I'm not trying to be radical or difficult or awful here, councillors. I just think that we've made this too hard for the average person in our city to actually be able to engage in this development. If national group builders are telling us it's too hard, no wonder average local people in our community are finding it too hard. I mean, I'm reasonably experienced in this space, and I read through this and have questions about what you can and can't do and how it can and can't work. So this can be changed. I don't think that having a rose bush would go against the integrity of the development, or that having a hip roof would go against the integrity of the development. And I would note, the officers made a very valid point that the people who have already bought into this with the understanding these would be the rules. However, 1.1, the first thing that the design guidelines says is the design guidelines may be amended by the developer at its discretion. So we have absolutely flagged this with everybody who's purchased here, that there is ability for us as a council, as the developer, to amend these guidelines at our discretion. And I think when we're seeing that the main people purchasing this are companies, not individuals, because they've found it's too hard, that now's the time for us to look at that option. And I would also note that we potentially have a survivorship bias here, where the officers, where this report from Jack says specifically, initially we had a lot of inquiry from people who wanted to build but found the design guidelines too hard, and then that's waned off. The reason that's waned off is the people who are interested in building and found it too hard have just stopped coming and stopped engaging with it. So the only people that are engaging with us now, because it's well known what the design requirements are those who are prepared to navigate it. And so I think it's a worthy goal to provide sections at an affordable rate for average mum and dads in our community. And I don't think that goal, we should give up on that goal. I think there is opportunity here for a bit of a reset. So I hope you'll support this. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, the Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I'm going to support both of these, and I just want to say it's ironic that we were once known as Rose City, yet we, as with our officer advice and consultant advice, we're now no longer allowed to plant a rose bush. So it's a bit ironical, isn't it? And we have the New Zealand Rose Gardens in our city as well. Look, in all seriousness, I think there needs to be some balance. And yes, we do need some design guidelines. I'd push back and say I've just been in Hamilton City and saw one of New Zealand's biggest subdivisions. Didn't see the design board. Yes, they've done a lot of urban design around their public infrastructure, but it'd be fair to say that they leave the market to do what it does best. Look, as a council, and I appreciate there's some newer members around the table and some of my older members may have forgotten, but it was around helping first home buyers get into the market. We did that through a number of ways, providing some, we went to the market first and said, can you do some smaller sections? And they said, no. So we tried to force the hand there. Yes, and there was some elements of trying to help CHIPS, perhaps have some homes. And there was also the revenue for ratepayers as well out of this, because this is public money, what we're dealing with. At no time can I recall that we were going to have design boards and at that stage. And look, I'll be really honest, the CE and I and senior management who are in this room have been approached by a number of leading builders and group builders of local and national level, and have sent a very clear message to the CE. You need to change what you're doing. It is too prescriptive. You're trying to design a bit of little old Surrey or whatever you're trying to do here, and that's the reason our consents are at the lowest they've ever been. take out presidential homes, and it's quite a sad indictment on our city. So there's a reason this has come here, and this is to be fair, this is an agent that's wanting to impress us. So it's good, but it has slanted too. So I would just say this is about just tweaking it back a little bit. I do agree we need to have some balance on it, but there's no sections for sale in Palmerston North, and they're all going to Fielding, Levin, Woodville, wherever else. So we do need, and I'm signalling we need to have a look at the district plan too. We do need to pare back this urban design. It is killing us, absolutely killing us. I know of no other regional city that is redesigning homes here. And to be fair to the officers, we've set this up, councillors. I've tried to go to the Chief Planning Officer and CEO and say, look, you've got to step back some of these rules, but it hasn't happened. So we've got to do it. Otherwise, we will go backwards. Our consenting numbers are appalling. So we can hide things, but actually we just need to, there's got to be some balance. So I think Councillor Wood's saying here that we're not going to walk back all the design requirements, but there needs to be some balance. And I think the Rosebush one was a good example. But I know colours of front doors, where you can park a car, where you can put, look, it just goes on and on and on. And I agree there needs to be some element of that, but it's gone too far. And the cost too. So here we are trying to help first home buyers, and we redesign it, and then we shovel that cost back onto the resource, to the applicant. So again, the market is telling us you're way out of kilter. So please, we're not Auckland, we're not Copenhagen, we're not all these other different places. We're Palmerston North, and I think we need to start acting like it. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson online.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I won't be supporting the additional recommendation. I'd ask that you take them together. I think there's a danger here that councillors that just don't agree with urban design are jumping to the conclusion that that's the reason that sales aren't as good as they have been hoping for. People seem to have forgotten that we're in a recession, that there's a cost of living crisis, that people have struggled to get finance, that interest rates have gone up sky high. And all of those things are acting as brakes on people buying sections. So I'm not convinced that it's all down to urban design, and if we just allow a free-for-all that suddenly all the sections will be sold. Absolutely not. And I do think it's interesting that councillors that have got no or very limited experience with the RMA or the district plan or any kind of planning are the ones criticising the urban design. As I recall, Councillor Wood was employed by Baylis. I'd be interested to know, Councillor Wood, in your right of reply, if you raised your concerns about the design requirements when you were working for Baylis. I just think we're going too far here. We're interfering, we're getting down in the weeds around design. This is not our business to be determining what the design should be, councillors. We employ planners, people who are experienced and qualified in this area, and I'm just not going to support this kind of on the hoof kind of, well, we know best, councillors, so we're going to make the rules. I just think it's quite silly, and I won't be supporting it.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, colleagues, as I listened with much interest. If I was to make a list of the things that have contributed to a downward pressure on the sales of Tamakuku Drive, there would be three things. Two of them have been tabled today. The urban design aspects, there was no need to be that prescriptive in the urban design. We know that the urban design rules around density housing would apply, but certainly in a residential single level subdivision, I don't think there was a need to do that. So that would be on the list. The group builder comments and the group builders that are finding the nature of the prescriptions of the design is real. It's absolutely real. If I was to give you an example of what a different model would look like, it would be our current subdivision in Ashford Avenue, Tuiria Place. We've got 16 sections for sale. We did impose land covenants, but as Bryce mentioned earlier on, but that was to protect the integrity of the subdivision. Our land covenants just didn't go as far as asking the owners where to, or telling the owners where to put their letterboxes or what sort of plants they needed to have in their front gardens. All we wanted to make sure is that a house was not going to be relocated into our subdivision, that the fencing was going to meet our resource consent. They could choose the fencing, and that there was landscaping that was going to maintain the integrity of the subdivision. So that's just an example of the difference between the urban design restrictions we put on Tamakuga. But the third thing that I noted when this proposal came to the market prior to me being a councillor was when we were offered at Te Tihi an opportunity to step into Tamakuku because there was council interest to support affordable housing. And what I've said since then, and in chamber as well, it was the cost of the sections that prevented us from being able to participate in what would have been an absolutely amazing opportunity for that end, that first home buyer end of the market. And if we talk about the cost, now that we know that the revenue to be realised from stage one alone has a $9 million profit attached to it. Did we need to be selling those sections at $300,000 when the cost was only $200,000? So a 33% profit comes into the council. We could have done better. So I'm going to support Councillor Wood's motions to give us an opportunity to have a rethink and a reset of what else we could do to realise, one, the sale of the remaining sections, the completion of stage two, and two, to perhaps open it up so that more people, including group builders, but certainly mums and dads, can participate. Thank you.
Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I just really have got, I guess, a bit of a query, really, and perhaps a comment. Setting aside, I guess, the conversation which is going around, you know, the willingness or otherwise of people actually planting roses, I'd just like to see perhaps a comment from David around any legal implications for council where we perhaps start to change the conditions of covenants. We've got, I guess, people who have already invested and actually have complied with the covenants on those builds. So are there any implications for us legally, and can that be built into, I guess, recommendation 2? Thank you.
Yeah, my answer through you, Madam Chair, David Murphy, Chief Planning Officer. We'd look to address that issue through the report back should resolution 2 pass.
Do you want to comment? Sorry.
Yes, I guess probably sort of my caution really is around, you know, when people have actually invested into, Mr. Mayor, are you perhaps?
Are you? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess my caution really is that, you know, if covenants have been applied to those sections that have actually already been sold, then I guess we need to make sure that we are clearly not disadvantaging those people that have already invested and built. So that's my primary concern. But other than that, given that David has actually said that we can actually build some advice into the report coming back, I'm actually quite happy to support both recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just go to the Mayor.
Sorry, just a question, because what Councillor Hancock brought up was quite critical. Are these covenants? Because if they are, they stay with the title, I understand, or are they just conditions on the first purchaser of the section?
My understanding, the large majority of what's been talked about this morning is the result of the covenants that are applied to the property.
So they stay on the title, is that correct? Okay, even worse, thank you.
Right. Okay. We are now back to you as your right to reply. Unless you're coming in for a reason. No? You were wanting to talk on that Okay, good. All right. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and you're right, Mr Mayor, it is even worse if they're covenants, but that's part of what will come back to us in the report. I think Councillor Hancock raised some really good questions around what the implications are, and that's the sort of advice that we're seeking, rather than saying here today that we'll make a call. Let's get the information back and see what it would look like before we make a decision. One thing I'd like to emphasise with this is that the wording is that we reduce, not get rid of the design requirements. So this isn't an anti-urban design thing. This isn't saying that we want to have a free-for-all where people are putting shacks up at Tamakuku Terrace. This is just saying we look at what the reduced requirement burden would be for this development. I'm also not, as Councillor Johnson implied, suggesting that design is the only problem and the only reason that sections haven't sold. I fully appreciate that we're in a difficult market. I appreciate that we've had uncertainty with COVID, we've had uncertainty with interest rate changes and with a whole number of financial pressures that households are facing. And so I'm not sitting here today saying, councillors, if we do this, that suddenly all the sections will be sold by the end of the year and that it'll be great. I'm saying that this is one of the many things that people consider when they make a decision whether they to buy one of these sections and build, and that this is one area. We can't control the interest rates, we can't control people's finances, we can't control the cost of living, but we can control the design requirements that we have on our own sections. And so this is not suggesting that this is the only thing that's going on. I would also note when I worked at Bailey's, I wrote the report, so I was merely an administrator, not the agent selling these sections, so it was not up to me to come to council and say, oh, your design requirements are too bad. But I would note that I distinctly remember in reading all of the viewer feedback of those that viewed Tamakuku Terrace and then putting them in the reports that went to Bryce, that there were many comments referring to the design, which is what Jack's reflected, because as the time he was referring to was the period I would have been writing those reports. So I can certainly say from my experience that would be the case. However, when I asked advice of officers recently whether I could go and visit Bailey's and have a conversation with them and see what the situation was, that would be an overstep into operational matters. So I haven't done that. So I haven't engaged with Bailey's since my employment ceased there, goodness, a year and a half, almost 2 years ago. So I appreciate this report that came to us and would like to see further vendor feedback as we go into this decision-making process. So, look, councillors, I appreciate the conversation and hopefully this will go through so we can have a sensible look at what the requirements are and absolutely what the implications would be if we were to make a change, because we also don't want to give a raw deal for those that have already put their money in and built a section here. So this is not trying to do that. This is just seeing what it is. And if we come to the conclusion that actually this would be unfairly to a material way disadvantaging those that are already there, well then I certainly wouldn't support progressing with any reductions. We'll just see where we get to. Thank you, councillors.
Thanks, Councillor Wood. So we're going to separate them. We'll do number 1 first, and then we'll do number 2. So can you see that, Councillor Johnson? We're going to do number 1, which is that we receive the report, and then we'll do the second, Councillor Wood's recommendation. Is that clear to you, Councillor Johnson? Okay, good. Okay, so we're going to vote on number 1 first, everyone. That's passed 12 votes for and none against. Did everybody vote? Oh, yeah. Okay, good. We'll go to the second one, please. That the Chief Executive provide options. Good. Not to vote. And that's passed 11 votes for and 1 against. Thanks, everybody. We're going to have a 15-minute break, so we'll come back at 11:15. Thanks, everybody. Right, welcome back, everybody. We're up to item 13 on page 113. It's a coincidence. And we have got Stacey, who is on Teams because she is not well. Teams. So, Stacey, I'll hand it over to you. Can you hear us? Great.
Yes, I can. Can you hear me, Leonie?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Chair, thank you. Kia ora tātou, Stacey Andrews, City Economist, Palmerston North City Council. Thank you for the opportunity to present the economic update today. I'm just going to make one comment on the report with regard to the city's snapshot, and that we are no longer able to publish this report due to that not complying with our terms of reference with Infometrics. The reason for that is that they market this information and sell it as a commercial good. So us publishing it, all the sort of tier 2 cities in the country, not deemed acceptable to them. We are in discussions with them at the moment, however, about them supporting us to do a refresh of the Core Cities report that was done in 2014. So we will come back to you with an update on that once we know more. I'll just give a brief update of the economic report, economic update that is in front of you. So it seems that writing out 2024 continues to be the key theme, not just for Palmerston North City, but for the entire national economy. So it really is a national and international story, with those interest rates being very high and placing extra pressure on households in terms of cost of living. Really, before we see an improvement in economic conditions, we need those interest rates to come down. On the very positive side, the efforts of the RBNZ to rein in inflation are working. We are seeing substantial decreases in those underlying inflationary pressures, and every day we're hearing more about how those inflationary pressures are pulling back than was anticipated previously. Some commentators now are expecting a fall on the OCR as early as November of this year, but the mid-range estimate thinks February monetary policy statement next year. Once we see those interest rates start to fall, households and businesses will have more money in their pockets to enable them to spend and invest in the economy, and we expect that recovery to begin in 2025. Happy to take any questions on the contents of the report.
Thank you very much, Stacey. Just one question to start off with from me on the retail card spending. It's a great report to read, and just looking at the different precincts, how did you find that report in terms of the way it's going for the city?
It is pretty typical of what's happening across the country. Of course, we do have a couple of bright spots in terms of in the CBD and Broadway Avenue, where we actually did see real growth in spending over the year at 4.5% versus the inflation rate of 4%. So that is positive. We saw that in Terrace End as well. Sorry, Terrace End was 4.5% in the CBD, and Broadway Avenue was 4%. So that is positive. Still, at the same time, don't want to take away from the fact that it's tough conditions out there for our retailers, and we're used to seeing quite strong growth in retail spending, and the fact that households are under pressure from those increased costs has really pulled back, in particular on discretionary spending.
Yeah, thank you. I'll hand over to other people, so we've got the Mayor to start with.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kia ora, Stacey. Thanks very much for the report. Just at the front end of when you started, you spoke about data not being ongoing. So the Core Cities report that you spoke about, is that going to include the stats and trends that we used to get back in 2015 or whenever it was with the 7 other cities? Is that what you're talking about?
We have been in discussions with Infometrics. Last quarter we did publish a report which we were going to continue to publish quarterly, that's just giving a snapshot of how we compare to other cities. Infometrics not happy for us to continue with that because it's on a quarterly basis. But in discussions with them, they will support us to do a refresh of the 2014 Core Cities report, which is the report that you are referring to. So that's what we're looking at the moment, is doing that broader report, deep dive into our city economy.
So Infometrics were not keen on a quarterly report, it does not fit their models.
In the sense that they're selling they sell that data across the country, and if we're publishing it for those cities on a quarterly basis, then that may impact on the purchase of their data. So it's commercial.
Okay, so it's a commercial decision.
It is very much a commercial decision.
Other people you can use?
We are looking at that. Unfortunately, Infometrics is the only consultancy or economic consultancy across the country where we can get TA level GDP and unemployment data, so that is the sticking point.
Okay, so sorry, Madam Chair, I just want to tease this out. So what are we going to do now? We're going to do a yearly Core Cities report. Is that what you're doing?
We are investigating that at present. I don't think we would be able to do an annual report, but we would look at doing basically an update of the 2014 report in the next year or two, and then having a scheduled, say, three to 5 yearly update. But no, unfortunately, unless we find other sources for that data, which we are investigating, we wouldn't be able to do it as often as annually.
Okay, all right. And just thank you for clarifying that. I think it's quite important. And just on this, the snapshots around consenting, on page 124, around dwelling consents, does that include transportable or movable homes?
I'm just getting to page 124, bear with me. That new dwelling consent figure just includes the consents, because that's the one that we compare. If you look in the report, there is reference within the report to net dwelling consents, which we are also starting to track now as well. And they remove factors such as uplifts of consent of properties that then undergo redevelopment, as well as relocates in and out and into the city.
Okay, so
two levels of data.
So at present, that 405 is a wash-up of everything, is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks again for your report, Stacey. It's always good to read this. Can I just tease out, Stacey, please, do you have at your disposal, or could you get your hands on the numbers around average household incomes as it relates to home ownership and rental affordability?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Fitzgerald. The census will provide very in-depth detail on home ownership and income levels at SA2 level. That will not be released until later this year. It's the best source of information we have. We can break that down to the type of family as well, such as single parents, disabled peoples, etc. So it's a very good data set, but unfortunately we only get that really good in-depth data every 5 years, but we'll certainly be packaging that up and bringing that back to council when we have that level of detail.
Wonderful. Thanks, Stacey.
Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Stacey. Just really got one question that's in relation to paragraph 2.32, which is Kaingaora. I'm just really curious as to whether or not we've actually had a formal response yet from Kaingaora in terms of their intended build program for Palmerston North.
Yes, very good question. I have been in contact with Kaingaora last week to ask for information. They have now put it in as an official information request, so we will have that information within the next about 15 working days now. So I'll be bringing that back to council once we know more about their investment plans.
Great, thanks, Madam Chair.
Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just with the average house value is on the page 124 that we referred to through the Mayor's question, of the average house price at $653. Two questions relating to this. One is that have you got a comment around a recent report in the Manawatu Standard around the medium sale price being $632? Have you got any comment around the sales of houses versus what you're saying is the average value of a home?
Yeah, sure. We actually had data renewed yesterday on house sale volumes, so we know that they have actually increased, actually very similar to what Bryce mentioned earlier, that we are seeing an increase in house sale volumes, so it's up about 4.5% in the city over the year. That's still coming off a very low base, so we've got a lot of houses on the market, but we are starting to see the turnover there. We're also at the national level starting to see an uptick in the amount of monthly mortgage lending, which is quite positive. We're also seeing a bit of investor lending coming back into the market as well. So that's positive. In terms of the average house value, this is a CoreLogic indicator, which looks at the whole stock of our housing over a 3-month period and gives an average house value. The median house value price that is, this is published from REINZ, the Real Estate Institute of New Zealand. This looks at the median price of all the houses sold in the area. So they're both very useful statistics, but they tell slightly different information.
Have you got any indication from QV with our community being revalued, our properties being revalued come September this year, what the trend is heading towards as far as a drop across values?
We haven't heard directly from CoreLogic with regard to this, but we know that our house values are about 13% off the peak. There are a lot of commentators, including the Reserve Bank of New Zealand, that are anticipating house prices to start to edge up again toward the end of 2025. So it will depend on the timing of the revaluation, but we would expect there to be an easing relevant to the price off the peak that we've experienced since the last revaluation.
Thank you. Thank you, Stacey. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Stacey. Question that's a little bit born out of the headlines, but will then hopefully go to your report. Continuing to notice headlines around record profits in some sectors, banking and supermarkets come to mind, and was noticed a commentary from Shamabeel Equib recently around profits going off a cliff, and it seemed like in that case it was more around perhaps small, medium enterprises and kind of the everyday businesses that we rely on. So 2 questions really. One, is there kind of 2 different economies running at this time? And if so, does this report shed any light on how that's impacting locally?
Absolutely, there is 2 different economies operating at this moment. Excuse me. Our small to medium enterprises are particularly vulnerable in this current economic cycle. Profits are very low, which is also impacting, of course, on revenues for our taxation as well. So there's that effect. So writing out 2024 is really important. Getting through this year and into a lower interest rate environment that will stimulate spending across the economy and for our small to medium enterprises is extremely important. With banks, banks always profit more when interest rates are higher. There are 2 sides to that equation. One, where there should be scrutiny over those profits that our banks are earning. There's the other side of the equation, that if our banks are profitable, then our financial stability is enhanced. So I do believe at the moment there is a government, the government is looking at the banks and putting pressure on to bring in things like open banking to increase competition, which could manage some of those excess profits that are being earned by our banking sector.
Thanks. Appreciate that additional commentary, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Stacey. There's no further questions, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll look to the recommendations. So I'd like to move the recommendations that the committee receive the Palmerston North Quarterly Economic Update for June 24, including the economic growth indicators for June 24 in attachment 1, and that the Palmerston North Electronic Spending Report March Quarterly 24 in attachment 2 presented to this committee today 2024, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Wood. I just want to say that it's a fantastic report, and we are very lucky to have an economist as we do in Stacey. I particularly enjoyed the quarterly economic electronic spending data. I just think that seeing the city bounce back a little bit in spending is good for businesses, and it's good to see that in that data, because data is how we see, it's factual, and I do enjoy seeing that kind of report. So well done on such a good report, and thank you for all the work you do. And going to a further comment from the Mayor.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Look, I agree with your comments, and I want to thank the author as well, Stacey. We roll Stacey out a bit now in terms of profiling the city. I think some businesses and some sectors are actually quite impressed that we have some of the level of data and on the pulse information that we can send out. Look, overall, I think the report, compared to the rest of New Zealand, isn't too bad. It shows some resilience. I agree with Councillor Barrett. I think there is two economies going on, and I do feel for the mum and dad small to medium businesses. And on that side, we've just got to make sure that, the diversity of our economic sector is encouraged. We're not reliant on an apple crop. We're not reliant on a port. We're not reliant on one particular sector. And it's also underpinned by quite a diverse agricultural and food and fibre sector around us as well. So there's lots to fall back on there. The data is always going to be a bit of a challenge, and I think Stats New Zealand is, and I'm sorry I don't hold them in great stead because they've miscounted our stuff so many times it isn't funny. But then when we get the mix of Infometrics, which we've just heard won't potentially do any more work for us that they can't sell to somebody else, is a bit of a concern. So I do back an overall core cities report, but teasing that out in questions, it's only going to be a position in time. These ongoing reports are really helpful because it gives you a bit of a pulse and reality check. So I do wonder how Stacey and David's team are going to do that going forward. We'll need some plan. Just a couple of things that are a little bit of a concern. GDP provisionally going down slightly. I think that's the first time I can recall that, which does show you there is a general softening in the wider economy. The increase in MSD benefits as well is not a great sign. But there's plenty of other positive things there around business counts, filling of jobs, and generally the money go around of earnings and spend. Housing's another one which is a bit of a concern, and back to my further comments just previously, if you look at the new dwelling consents, that number is masked quite considerably. So if you take out the 125 odd movable homes in the city, that brings down that number, and 95% or even possibly 99% of those go outside our city. That means that the true number there is about 290 to 300 consents a year. That's appalling for a city of our size. And it's starting to come home to bite, and we do need to look at the reasons why, and hence my earlier comments. But I think we've got to get some true data on that. So to the officers and Stacey, to the acting CE and the Chief Planning Officer, we do need to get some understanding on that and why that is so low. Because we did have I think a target of around 500. So we're just above halfway. I mean, that is a real concern going forward. So we've got jobs, but people don't live in the city. We've got businesses, but people don't live in the city, and there's reasons why. So that's the reasons why we have these reports, so we can pull out this sort of data and make these assumptions. So thank you, Stacey. Good work as always. Thank you.
Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just following on from the Mayor's comments around the new dwellings, which is highlighted on page 124, around our growth strategy and assumption of 500 dwellings or new residential lots a year is well off track and fading. But actually, I just wanted to highlight that against the New Zealand trend, which in the green shaded column is 23% down. So overall, in this context, we're actually still holding our own, but nationally it's a big dip in new dwelling consents. And so as a housing shortage with the themes coming through, that's actually an indication of that we're still not keeping up. And that's because of the cost of land, the cost of building, the interest rates, a whole bunch of other contributing factors. For sure, which we highlighted in a previous report, but nationally we're not in great space to keep our build program going. The other thing I just wanted to highlight around the spending, it's interesting annually that our new car registrations and that further up were 10% growth in car registrations, and commercial vehicles, up 13%, another 1,000 vehicles. So I'm wondering if that points to the fact that people still like driving their cars, and it'll be interesting to, Palmerston North is the best place to drive a car. And I just highlight that because we're outstripping the national average on those ones too. And when we're trying to fight the trends, that's what we're up against. So just interesting little facts. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Always amusing. Okay, no more comments, so we'll look to vote. That's passed, 13 votes for, none against. And now I think Councillor Dennison will have his opportunity to talk about further and the work schedule. So we've got the work schedule on page 14. I'll draw your attention to that. The Chief Planning Officer can bring up anything in there.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one comment, the parking framework. So the work on that is well advanced, and it was sort of ready to come to committee, but we just want to make sure that we spend the time to make sure that elected members are fully averse or over the content of that before it comes to committee. Given on the back of the LTP, Featherston Street and other things, we just wanted to make sure that elected members have seen the revised document after the last briefing before it then comes back to committee. So that's the reason why that's been pushed out to September.
Thank you. We'll go through the list now. We've got Councillor Wood to start with.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just on those two Featherston Street reports, I recall that they've been handled by Council primarily up until now. I was just wondering if there's a reason for the change to come to the Economic Growth Committee. I'm appreciating that we look after the Urban Cycle Network Master Plan, just precedent would say that it would go to Council.
Because they're the terms of reference of this committee.
Appreciating that, but it hasn't in the past, so just wondering why there's been a change in approach.
Because they're in the terms of reference of this committee.
And then just a question on that final one.
Sorry, do you want me to keep?
No, that's fine.
I'm just answering the question.
Mind. On page 137, I just note that last Featherston Street concept design report, councillors requested a change from just looking at shared walkway and non-separated cycleways to also looking at other options. I just want to make sure that's captured in there, that
So
it will
it
also
says
include.
design options, shared walkways and non-separated cycleways.
So I just want to make sure it includes.
We'll certainly make sure that the report addresses the resolution that was passed. I think sometimes there's a summary of the heading. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think the box wasn't big enough. Okay, Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just noting we didn't have the Palmy bid presentation today.
Yes,
Wondering when that's going to be
I'd already brought that
rescheduled
up.
to.
So it is going, I know you love them. It's going to come in where the chamber is as well. It's going to have two presentations next month. Unfortunately, Matthew was sick today, so that's why he's not here. So we're going to have, on the 18th, we're going to have the bid and the chamber.
Excellent. I look forward to that.
You might be away. Right, okay. I'll now look if we've got no any further comments. Oh no, we've got the Mayor.
Just to end on a nice note, Councillor Dennison just wanted to know when Featherston Street reports were coming back.
On the 20th of November.
Thank you.
Since there's no further questions, I'll look to move this, seconded by councillor Wood. And is there any further comment? No. Right, we'll vote. That's passed, 13 votes for and none against. And now we'll look to councillor Sibelin to close for us today.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Me ino e tātou. Kia puta ki te whaiau, ki te ao marama, whakamaua ki a tina, haumie hui e, tai ki e. Thank you.
The Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair.